Most people read Think and Grow Rich and focus only on money. But the real idea is not money. It's thinking. Not positive thinking. Not blind belief. Structured thinking. There is a reason the title begins with think. Because growth does not start in action. It starts in mental direction. Every result you see in someone's life once existed as a repeated thought pattern. Repeated thoughts shape decisions. Decisions shape behavior. Behavior shapes outcomes. The problem is not that people don't think. The problem is that people think randomly. Random thoughts create random results. He began noticing this in his own life. On days when his mind was scattered, his actions were scattered. On days when his thoughts were intentional, his behavior followed a clear path. Wealth, in the deeper sense, is not only financial, it is clarity, it is focus, it is emotional stability, it is the ability to direct your mind instead of being controlled by it. Most people want to grow rich externally without becoming rich internally. But internal poverty creates external limits. If you constantly think in terms of fear, comparison, and doubt, you will unconsciously make decisions that protect you instead of expand you. Growth requires mental expansion first. This does not mean pretending everything is possible overnight. It means deliberately choosing the kind of thinking that supports your direction. For example, instead of thinking, "What if this fails?" the disciplined mind asks, "What skill would make this stronger?" That shift changes energy. It moves from anxiety to construction. Construction builds wealth. Desire is important, but desire alone is unstable. Desire without structure turns into frustration. That is why many people feel inspired after reading books like Think and Grow Rich, but nothing changes long term. Inspiration fades. Structure remains. True growth happens when desire meets disciplined thought. Disciplined thought means you monitor your mental patterns the same way you monitor your habits. You notice when you drift into distraction. You notice when your focus weakens. And instead of criticizing yourself, you redirect. Redirection is power. Most people waste years trying to change outcomes without changing thought patterns. But the subconscious repeats whatever you feed it consistently. If you feed it doubt, it produces hesitation. If you feed it clarity, it produces direction. This is why belief matters. Not blind belief, but trained belief. Belief formed through repetition, through evidence, through consistent effort. When you repeatedly take small aligned actions, your mind begins to trust your vision. That trust strengthens your thinking. Strong thinking sharpens your decisions. Sharp decisions accelerate progress. This is the real meaning of growing rich. You grow rich in discipline. You grow rich in focus. You grow rich in identity. And identity determines income, impact, and influence. You cannot earn beyond your mental ceiling for long. If your identity believes you are small, you will shrink opportunities. If your identity believes you are capable, you will expand into them. So the real question is not how do I grow rich? It is how do I think in a way that supports expansion? Rich thinking is patient. Rich thinking is strategic. Rich thinking is calm under pressure. It does not panic at delay. It does not collapse at failure. It adjusts and continues. That is the difference between those who read the book and those who live the principle. One gets motivation. The other builds mental architecture. And mental architecture shapes destiny, because destiny is not a sudden event. It is the long-term result of repeated thinking patterns that guide repeated decisions. Most people think destiny is something that happens to them. In reality, it is something that forms slowly through mental structure. If your mind is disorganized, your life will reflect that disorder. If your thinking is reactive, your results will be unstable. But when your mental architecture is strong, deliberate, and intentional, your external world begins to mirror that stability. Mental architecture is built the same way buildings are built. You do not start with decoration. You start with foundation. In the mind, foundation is belief, not fantasy, but deeply held assumptions about what is possible for you. If you believe success requires suffering beyond your limits, you will unconsciously avoid it. If you believe wealth is unsafe or complicated, you will sabotage opportunities. If you believe you are capable of growth, you will interpret challenges as training instead of punishment. Belief determines interpretation. Interpretation determines action. Action determines outcome. Most people focus only on action, ignoring the belief underneath it. But action without aligned belief creates internal resistance. You may work hard, but part of you is pulling back. That tension slows progress. Strong mental architecture removes that tension. It aligns belief with intention. When you truly believe growth is possible and deserved, your effort becomes cleaner. You no longer hesitate at every opportunity. You move with confidence that feels grounded, not forced. Another part of mental architecture is focus. Rich thinking requires the ability to hold one idea long enough for it to develop. Many people jump from goal to goal because they mistake excitement for alignment. But wealth, in any form, rewards depth. Depth requires patience. When you commit to a direction and refine it over time, your thinking becomes sharper. You see patterns others miss. You understand timing better. You make fewer impulsive decisions. Impulsiveness weakens structure. Clarity strengthens it. Mental architecture also includes emotional control. If your emotions control your thinking, your structure becomes unstable. One setback can shake your confidence. One criticism can derail your plan. But when emotions are observed instead of obeyed, thinking remains steady. You feel disappointment without abandoning your vision. You experience doubt without surrendering to it. That steadiness compounds. Over years, steady thinkers outperform talented but inconsistent thinkers, not because they are more gifted, but because they are structured. Structure allows growth without collapse. Think and Grow Rich was never just about money. It was about the discipline of directing thought. It was about guarding your mental space. It was about choosing ideas carefully and feeding them consistently. The mind is fertile soil. Whatever you plant repeatedly will grow. If you plant fear, you cultivate hesitation. If you plant focus, you cultivate mastery. Mastery builds value, and value creates wealth. True wealth begins as internal organization. When your thoughts are aligned, your energy is aligned. When your energy is aligned, your actions are efficient. Efficient action multiplies results. That is why mental architecture shapes destiny. Because destiny follows structure. It follows the thoughts you allow daily. It follows the beliefs you reinforce repeatedly. It follows the identity you build quietly. If you want a different destiny, you must redesign your mental architecture, not through temporary motivation, but through consistent mental discipline. Think intentionally. Believe carefully. Act steadily. Over time, your destiny will not surprise you. It will reflect you, not the version of you that speaks about success occasionally, but the version of you that thinks about growth consistently. Not the version of you that feels inspired once in a while, but the version of you that directs thoughts deliberately, even when no one is watching. Your outer world is rarely ahead of your inner world. It usually mirrors it. If your thinking is scattered, your results will feel scattered. If your thinking is disciplined, your results will begin to organize themselves. This is not magic, it is alignment. He began to understand that nothing in his life changed randomly. Every breakthrough had a mental pattern behind it. Every setback had a belief attached to it. When he traced his results back far enough, they always led to repeated thoughts. Repeated thoughts become internal instructions. Those instructions guide behavior quietly. They influence what you attempt, what you avoid, how long you persist, and how quickly you recover from difficulty. Most of this happens unconsciously. That is why thinking must become intentional. When you allow your mind to drift without direction, it absorbs whatever is loudest: fear, comparison, doubt, distraction. Those inputs slowly design your mental architecture without permission. But when you choose what to think about consistently, you begin designing that architecture yourself. Design requires awareness. Awareness means noticing what you feed your mind daily: conversations, content, self-talk, assumptions. Each of these either strengthens your structure or weakens it. If you repeatedly tell yourself that growth is difficult, your effort will feel heavy. If you repeatedly remind yourself that growth is possible with patience, your effort becomes sustainable. Mental design is subtle, but powerful. He stopped consuming ideas that created chaos in his thinking. He stopped entertaining doubts that had no evidence. He stopped replaying failure as identity. Instead, he focused on reinforcing thoughts that supported expansion. Not unrealistic optimism, but constructive thinking. Constructive thinking asks, "What can I learn?" Instead of "Why me?" It asks, "What is the next move?" Instead of "Is this fair?" It replaces emotional reaction with strategic response. Strategy compounds. The longer you think strategically, the clearer your direction becomes. The clearer your direction becomes, the less energy you waste. Less wasted energy means more focus. More focus means deeper results. This is how destiny forms slowly. Not in a single decision, but in repeated mental discipline. Over time, You notice something different. You no longer feel like life is unpredictable. You begin to see patterns. You recognize how your inner state shapes your outer environment. Confidence stops being loud. It becomes steady. You trust your thinking process because you have trained it. You trust your decisions because they come from structure, not impulse. You trust your direction because it is built on deliberate belief. That trust is powerful. Because when you trust your mental architecture, you stop chasing validation. You stop reacting to every opinion. You stop abandoning ideas prematurely. You commit. Commitment creates depth. Depth creates authority. Authority over your own thinking creates freedom. And freedom shapes destiny more than luck ever could. When your mind is structured, destiny becomes predictable in one way. It reflects your design. If you design your thinking around scarcity, scarcity repeats. If you design it around growth, growth multiplies. So the question is no longer whether destiny exists. The question is who is designing it. If you leave it to randomness, randomness will shape it. If you take responsibility for your thoughts, responsibility will shape it. And when you do that long enough, something changes. You no longer hope for a better future. You build one. Thought by thought, decision by decision, structure by structure. Until one day, what you once imagined quietly becomes the life you are living. Not because of luck, but because your mental architecture made it inevitable. Inevitable does not mean guaranteed overnight. It means that over time, the direction of your life becomes predictable based on the structure of your thinking. When your thoughts are aligned with growth, discipline, patience, and belief, the outcomes that follow may vary in timing, but not in direction. Direction is everything. Most people overestimate intensity and underestimate direction. They think one powerful decision will change everything. In reality, it is the quiet reinforcement of the same aligned thought, repeated daily, that changes everything. He realized that inevitability is built slowly. When you think in a structured way long enough, your behavior adjusts automatically. You begin choosing differently without forcing yourself. You say yes to opportunities that align and no to distractions that dilute focus. Those small decisions accumulate. Accumulation creates momentum. Momentum reduces doubt. And reduced doubt increases clarity. Clarity strengthens structure even more. This cycle is subtle, but once it begins, it becomes self-sustaining. You are no longer fighting your own mind. You are directing it. You are no longer reacting to every emotion. You are observing and choosing. Choice becomes intentional. Intentional choice becomes habit. Habit becomes identity. And identity shapes destiny in ways that feel natural instead of dramatic. Inevitability is not about control. It is about coherence. When your thoughts, beliefs, and actions are coherent, life stops feeling random. You see how one decision leads to another. You see how patience protects progress. You see how discipline creates options. Options are a form of wealth. When you think clearly, you create options. When you act consistently, you expand those options. When you believe in your capacity, you step into them. The mind that is structured does not panic at delay. It interprets delay as part of the process. It does not collapse under pressure. It adjusts without losing direction. Adjustment is strength. Rigid thinking breaks under stress. Flexible structure bends and returns. That return keeps progress intact. That return keeps inevitability alive. Over time, he noticed that success stopped feeling surprising, not because it was easy, but because it was aligned. The results matched the design. The growth matched the effort. The direction matched the belief. Nothing felt accidental. It felt earned. Earned through disciplined thought. Earned through consistent belief. Earned through intentional action. This is the deeper meaning of thinking and growing rich. It is not about wishing. It is about designing. Designing your inner world so carefully that the outer world has no choice but to follow. If you design doubt, doubt becomes familiar. If you design focus, focus becomes natural. If you design resilience, resilience becomes automatic. Automatic strength creates steady progress. Steady progress compounds into visible success. And visible success reinforces the mental architecture that created it. This feedback loop is powerful. Once it stabilizes, you stop chasing change and start refining direction. You stop fearing uncertainty and start trusting your ability to navigate it. You understand that destiny is not something waiting ahead. It is something forming now. With every thought you repeat, with every belief you strengthen, with every action you align, And when those elements remain structured long enough, success no longer feels like a possibility. It feels like a continuation of the thinking patterns you chose, a continuation of the discipline you practiced, a continuation of the identity you built. That is inevitability. Not loud, not sudden, but steady. And steady, over time, becomes unstoppable, not because it moves fast, but because it never fully stops. What keeps moving, even slowly, eventually covers distance that sudden bursts never can. Intensity impresses for a moment. Steadiness builds for a lifetime. When you are steady, you are not easily shaken by setbacks. A delay does not feel like defeat. A mistake does not feel like identity. You correct, adjust, and continue. That continuation is where power accumulates. Power accumulates quietly. It builds in the way you think when no one hears you, in the way you respond when things don't go as planned, in the way you keep your direction even when results are invisible. Most people lose momentum because they are emotionally attached to immediate feedback. If progress is not visible, they assume it is not happening. But growth is often internal long before it becomes external. He understood this after observing his own patterns. In earlier years, he would start strong, fueled by excitement, only to lose consistency when results slowed. Each restart cost him confidence. Each unfinished effort weakened belief. But when he shifted toward steady thinking and steady action, something changed. He stopped measuring progress daily. He started measuring direction monthly, yearly. The scale widened. Patience deepened. Patience makes steadiness sustainable. Without patience, consistency feels restrictive. With patience, it feels empowering. You are no longer trapped in the urgency of immediate outcomes. You are investing in inevitability. Inevitability removes anxiety. When you know that small actions repeated daily will compound, you stop worrying about short-term fluctuations. You trust the math of repetition. You trust the structure you built. Structure protects momentum. Momentum, once protected long enough, becomes difficult to interrupt. Even when life demands attention elsewhere, you return quickly. Even when distractions appear, they lose strength. You are anchored. Anchored people are hard to derail. They do not react wildly to trends. They do not chase every new opportunity. They evaluate, decide, and commit carefully. That careful commitment strengthens their path. Over time, the gap between steady thinkers and inconsistent thinkers widens. Not dramatically at first, but gradually, year by year. The one who stayed steady builds depth, skill, reputation, and clarity. Clarity reduces wasted motion. Less wasted motion increases efficiency. Efficiency accelerates growth without increasing stress. This is how steadiness becomes unstoppable. Not through force, but through refinement. Refinement makes you sharper without making you louder. You understand your strengths better. You recognize your weaknesses without fear. You adjust your strategy calmly instead of reacting emotionally. Emotional reaction consumes energy. Calm adjustment preserves it. Preserved energy fuels long-term effort. Long-term effort compounds into mastery. Mastery attracts opportunity. Opportunity, when handled with structure, multiplies. And the cycle continues. Eventually, people see the results and call it discipline, talent, or luck. They see the surface. They do not see the years of quiet repetition, the internal corrections, the consistent mental design. But you see it. You feel it. You know that what appears unstoppable was built one steady decision at a time. That is the difference between chasing success and constructing it. Chasing is reactive. Constructing is intentional. Intentional action repeated long enough becomes powerful beyond resistance. It no longer depends on emotion. It no longer depends on applause. It no longer depends on perfect timing. It depends on structure. And structure, once reinforced through years of steady effort, does not collapse easily. That is why steadiness wins. Not because it is exciting, but because it endures. And what endures shapes everything around it.